Hey guys, today we are going to do a tribute to Mr. Beast. He is my favorite all-time YouTuber and does a lot of risks to get views. So I think he deserves a tribute of saying his name as many times as I can. Ready? Let's start. In 3, 2, 1, go. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Wait, hold up. After saying Mr. Beast, I want to show you guys a giveaway. I'm doing a cash giveaway for 10 American dollars because I'm poor. So just hit me up on Instagram and enter in my giveaway by liking my post. And let's continue saying Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. By the way, my Instagram is my same as my YouTube channel. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. I'm just counting on pen and paper. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. And Mr. Beast, if you're watching this, just saying you've done an amazing career on YouTube, and I hope you can keep making more videos. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Oh, and I'm giving away a broken iPad just so you can smash it or something. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. You're the best. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Leave a like on the video. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. Just saying your name is really hard to say. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Sorry, I can't pronounce T's very well. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Oh, and next video, if I can get 10 likes at most, I will do a Logan Paul video saying Logan Paul, Logan Paul, Logan Paul, just like Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. I'm going to go around 10 minutes. Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast. I know you did like an hour times that, Mr. Beast, but I don't know. Just don't have that much time. Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. You're a beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Mr. Beast, Beast, Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. You're awesome, just saying, again. My camera is low, so let's keep saying Mr. Beast, 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 Mr. Beast. 1 second.